The president addressing the nation on the adjustments to the lockdown level, not adjusted at this time, staying on lockdown level 1. However, some restrictions have had to be readjusted to allow for the period that we are going into, that of the Easter period. We're joined now by Maryna Calow of Wines of South Africa. Maryna, good evening and thank you for your time tonight. Let's get your reaction then to the president's limitation on the sale of alcohol for 4 days, from Friday, Saturday, Sunday and Monday, and with the reopening then happening thereafter. The president saying, well, the specific circumstances attached to alcohol is that sometimes it leads to bad behavior, so to speak. From the wine industry sector, how does that affect your internal circulation of alcohol?
Well, I think while we are grateful that the hospitality sector as a whole hasn't been shut down and people can still visit our wineries over the weekend, I think the major frustration and concern lies around the issue that President Ramaphosa mentioned, that there was consultation. Throughout this past year, there has been, in fact, no consultation with us as industry, and the same counts for the wider alcohol industry. And therein lies the main frustration for us. There seems to be this narrative of making alcohol the scapegoat, and to close on off-consumption sales simply doesn't make sense. People just want to have a drink with their families in their home, a small grouping, when groups of hundreds are allowed to gather in situations that simply won't be able to be controlled. So we are highly frustrated with the situation as it stands right now.
Yeah. What do you make of this collective understanding from the Coronavirus Command Council to the Presidential Council as well as Cabinet to say, well, it's better if people go to the restaurant and drink on site because at least they'll leave early and then they'll go home, as opposed to allowing them to consume or purchase off-site and consume at home? I'm not quite sure how do they come to that particular conclusion, that it would be safer that way.
Well, we'd also love to know how they get to that conclusion, because it's really quite nonsensical. And the fear lies in what happens when the third wave really hits. Will they close us down again? And what is the scientific data that is being used? We as an industry have been very proactive in our approach in this regard. We've submitted tiniest proposals to government on ways to mitigate the third wave from an alcohol perspective, and it just seems to be falling on deaf ears. So consultation, as per President Ramaphosa's perception, that simply isn't happening. We are also some of the people who merely hear about the regulations when announcements are made on the news.
Yeah. Do you get the sense that, I suppose, Cabinet and all those who are making these decisions understand the impact that this has had? I think it's the 5th banning on alcohol, but also just the role of the alcohol sector in the economy is well understood.
One can only wonder where they are, because we as an industry have collectively raised our voices quite significantly over this period of time. Financial losses in excess of 36 billion rand for our industry combined. The job losses have exceeded 200,000 jobs. It's really scary what's going on, and yet no one in government seems to be taking notice.
Yeah. How does this ban then impact on the distribution of wine, the shipping of wine outside of the country?
From an export perspective, those are still going ahead as normal. We are experiencing some major issues at the Cape Town Port Terminal, which is our main export from where we export our wines for our industry, and that is a major concern. However, exports can still go ahead, and it seems to be throwing us somewhat of a lifeline in light of the fact that our government is imposing these bans they seem to feel the need to do. But the reality is exports isn't the answer for our industry. The rest of the world, especially our largest export market of Europe, is also under lockdown with their hospitality sector and their on-con sector closed. So a lot of the exports are going into retail, but there is still a large element of that on-consumption hospitality element that is closed, and that does affect us as well.
How has it affected the production of wine itself? I mean, South Africa known to be producing some of the better wines compared to elsewhere in the world. I mean, has this on and off in any way affected the quality of the wine that is being produced?
It most certainly hasn't affected the quality. That I can vouch for. We are in our harvest period at the moment. We have about 30% of our vines that still need to be harvested. And I think it's demoralizing for our industry, for our wine farmers, our growers, and the people who work in our industry to think that our government don't have our back. We are fighting a battle that just is falling on deaf ears at this point in time. So for now, we need to continue doing what we do and complete our harvest. It is a very successful harvest so far, with reports coming back in terms of quality that it is absolutely excellent. This, of course, following the recent drought that ended last year as well. So we remain hopeful, but we cannot continue in this trend with government shutting us down at will. Without scientific data. Give us the scientific data. We have asked on a number of occasions for our government to supply us with information on hospital admissions during the various waves, and this is not forthcoming. This data surely must be available for government to make these decisions. So why not share it with us and disclose this empirical data that we desperately ask for?
Maryna, one of the things that we have seen is organizations that do research, at least this is some of the institutions of the government, that have been showing numbers of increasing accidents, or even just the rate that of patients that they need to deal with over weekends where the restrictions have not been implemented. Have you not seen those numbers, or are you talking about being engaged on those numbers more officially?
I think being engaged on the numbers, those numbers are available on the SAMRC forums. But the reality is what isn't disclosed is exactly how many of the trauma cases are directly linked to alcohol use or alcohol abuse. And that data doesn't seem to be coming through. We as an industry have given proposals to say, you know, if there is a curfew put in place, surely that will limit alcohol-related trauma incidents in that regard. I think there are many other ways that things can be mitigated in this instance. But also, I think it's very important to note here that there is a responsibility from government to ensure that things get policed properly. And that is also missing. We cannot keep blaming the alcohol industry for things going wrong. There also needs to be a bit of blame laid at the feet of the policing of the rules and regulations that we have, the laws that have been there for a long time. And one has to raise that question.
Are you seeing any particular trends when it comes to the sales of alcohol, especially during the periods just before tight restrictions are announced? I mean, are people bulk buying and storing alcohol in their homes, again, out of fear of these very sudden announcements that come?
Absolutely. On my drive home tonight, the queues outside the liquor stores that I drove past were on the pavements. So people are nervous and they're anxious and they're going to buy. And as things are going to turn out, they have 2 days to go and do their alcohol shopping for the Easter weekend. That's the reality. But so what is the point? They now know that they just have to go and stock up and it's all fine. So I think this 4-day ban on alcohol sales won't affect us quite so badly. But the question is why? What's the thinking behind it? What's the reasoning behind it? And those answers simply don't seem to exist.
Maryna Calow, appreciate you. Thanks for joining us tonight from Wines of South Africa. They're seeking to understand the collective rationale around this particular 4-day ban. And she does make a point. Previously, you would have the president saying the sale of alcohol is banned with immediate effect. He didn't follow that route because, of course, previously he was criticized to say, we've already stocked up. So when you say with immediate effect, what do you say must happen to the stock that we already have in our shops? We've already spent money. It's wastage. You're actually killing our businesses. So I suppose this time around he says there's a 2-day head start to the sector.
Head start, really?
Like heads up, shall we say. And that is quite an interesting approach that, of course, they are taking this time around, which then begs that very important question. What is then the point? Because then people would have stocked up anyway and consuming offside.
Look,